All right, let's talk about the cloud. If you spent any time there, you know that security is just everything. But think about this. How do you manage who gets to do what when you have tons of people, tons of applications, all needing access? Well, today, we are unlocking the secrets of AWS Identity and Access Management, or IAM. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with a basic problem, just controlling access. Then, we'll meet the key players in the IAM family. After that, we'll get into how the rules are actually written, we'll check out how temporary access works, and finally, we'll look at the slick, modern way to manage the whole shebang.
Okay, let's start with the big picture. Imagine your company is just exploding. You're adding new developers, new servers, new databases in the cloud every single day. The really big question becomes, who gets the keys to what?
I mean, seriously, think about it. Are you going to share one super powerful login with everyone? No way. That's a disaster waiting to happen. But are you going to create a separate login for every single person for every single service? That would be an absolute nightmare to manage. This is the core challenge that pretty much every organization runs into.
And this right here, this is the solution. AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM for short, is the service that lets you securely control who gets access to your AWS resources. It's basically the gatekeeper for your entire cloud setup.
You know, the easiest way to think of IAM is like a bouncer at a club. It has two really critical jobs. First, authentication. It's got to check your ID and make sure you are who you say you are. Then there's authorization. Once you're in, it checks the list to see what you're actually allowed to do. Okay, so to really get how this bouncer works, we need to meet the main players in the IAM family. AWS calls these principals, but really they're just the who in the question of who gets to do what.
First up, the user. This is pretty straightforward. It's a single person, like a developer on your team, or maybe even an application that needs to talk to AWS. But here's the most crucial part. When you create a new IAM user, by default, it can do absolutely nothing. Zero permissions. It can't touch a thing until you say so.
Now, trying to manage permissions for each user one by one, that would be a huge pain. And that's exactly where groups come in. A group is just what it sounds like, a collection of users. You can make a developers group, a finance group. You attach permissions to the group and boom, every user inside it automatically gets those permissions. It's all about making life easier.
And finally, we have the role. Now, this one is a little different. A role isn't tied to one specific person. Think of it more like a hat. It's a set of permissions that anyone, or anything, like a server that needs to read from a database, can temporarily put on to do a job. And when the job's done, you just take the hat off.
This gives you a perfect visual of how it all clicks together. You've got your individual users, Bob, Susan, Nate, and you organize them into logical groups like admins and developers. It's a really clean, simple structure, all living right inside a single AWS account.
So what's the real gut-level difference between a user and a role? It all comes down to the credentials. A user gets permanent long-term keys. A role, on the other hand, hands out temporary short-term keys that just expire. That's why users are meant for people, while roles are absolutely perfect for services or for granting temporary access to someone from outside your team.
All right, so we've met the who, the users, groups, and roles. Now we've got to define the what. What can they actually do? And for that, we use these documents called IAM policies.
Okay, I get it. At first glance, this can look a little intimidating. This is an IAM policy, and it's written in a format called JSON. But don't worry, it's actually way simpler than it looks. Let's just break it down.
See, every policy really just boils down to these three simple parts. First, the effect. Is this rule an allow or a deny? Second, the action. What specific thing are you allowed to do, like start a server or list files? And third, the resource. Which exact thing does this rule apply to? It's really just like building a sentence. I allow you to list buckets on this specific bucket over here.
Now, this right here is the golden rule of IAM, the most important thing to remember. If a person has 10 different policies attached to them that all say allow, but just one of them has an explicit deny for that same action, the deny wins every single time. This is a huge security feature that lets you lock things down with total confidence.
So up to now, we've been talking about users that are inside your account. But what if an application only needs access for, say, 5 minutes? Or what if you want to give access to users from a totally different company? This is where things get really cool and powerful.
Let me introduce you to the AWS Security Token Service, or STS. This is the engine that really makes IAM roles work. Its entire purpose in life is to create and hand out temporary security keys that are only valid for a short time, maybe a few minutes, maybe a few hours.
And the process is super straightforward. Something, like an application on a server, asks STS for access. STS checks it out and sends back a set of temporary keys. The application uses those keys to do whatever it needs to do, and after a little while, poof, those keys just stop working. You don't have to remember to turn them off.
Now, managing a single AWS account with IAM is one thing, but what happens when your organization grows and suddenly you have 10 accounts or 100? That's when you need the modern solution, IAM Identity Center.
This right here, this is the old school problem. With regular IAM, if a developer needs to get into the dev, test, and production accounts, they need 3 different logins. They're stuck juggling multiple passwords, multiple sets of access keys. It's messy, and it's a security risk.
IAM Identity Center, which you might have known as AWS SSO, completely fixes this. It basically sits on top of all your accounts and gives you one central dashboard to manage who gets access to what. Your users get a single login portal, and from there, they can jump into any account or application you've given them permission for.
So let's just put them side by side to make it crystal clear. Regular IAM is your bread and butter for managing permissions inside one single account. But the second your company grows to multiple accounts, IAM Identity Center is the way to go. It becomes your central hub, simplifying everything across your entire cloud.
And if you take away only one thing from all of this, let it be this concept, the principle of least privilege. It's the most important security idea in the cloud. All it means is only grant the absolute minimum permissions that someone or something needs to do its job. Nothing more.
From individual users to massive company-wide access, IAM gives you all the tools, but they all serve that one core idea, the principle of least privilege. By sticking to that, you make sure the right people have the right keys, and only the right keys. So the question to ask yourself is this: are you handing out master keys to your whole cloud, or just the keys to the specific rooms, the